Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey there, and welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for selecting this podcast. There are over 2 million podcasts that have been started, and right now you could be listening anywhere, but you're really smart because you have chosen to listen to the show that is designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, go visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every single week for the last 2 years with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, are we still having fun hosting this show?
Oh, yeah, especially since the pandemic is receding, at least here in the United States. So this is great news. And, you know, a lot of things have happened to people in the past 18 months. And one of the things is some people have started their own companies. And today's guest has insights and advice for those folks, especially if they're still producing a product, something you can hold in your hand, right? Or something you can drive or whatever. And he has some insights that I thought would be great to share with the audience. So, you know, for those of you that are out there hanging up your own shingle and trying to figure out how to make it all work, pay attention. Here we go.
Fasten your seatbelts because there's going to be a lot of good advice coming down here. Because every single week, Craig and I try to bring to this podcast really interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help all of our listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today we have Andrew Lees, and he is the founder of Stoke Ventures. What he does is he helps people develop products and launch those products into the market. He takes that big idea, that big, bold, beautiful idea that is in your head and helps you get it out into the world. So Andrew, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thanks, Thom. I'm so excited to be on this show with you guys. I really appreciate it. Both Thom and Craig, you guys you bring the energy. So I'm going to try and match that. I'm really excited to talk about some of the things that you want to talk about with business, product launch, and all that stuff. So very cool to be here.
Great. And we're glad to have you. So give us a little bit about your background. How did you get into this world of what you do? What did you do before you founded Stoke Ventures? And then tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah. So my background is actually in mechanical engineering. Even to rewind it a little bit before that, I was always, as a kid, I was always had this inventive spirit. I was always taking things apart and trying to put them back together. I got better at the actual putting them back together part as time went on. But I always had this fascination with physical products and what made them tick, what made them work, and how you would actually go about developing a product and why. So I always had that, and I wanted to be an inventor. That's what I thought my job title would be when I grew up. And then I kind of realized that, well, inventor isn't necessarily something you can study it in school. You know, at least it wasn't when I went to college. It's becoming a little bit more common to get, you know, at least formal entrepreneurship training. But yeah, so I wanted to develop products. I didn't know what would be a great background for that. And my grandfather was a mechanical engineer. So, and I really respected that. I thought that was so cool. And so I thought, well, mechanical engineering would be a great foundation for being, you know, an inventor and helping to develop my ideas. And I went to Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. I got a mechanical engineering degree. And then while I was in college, I thought maybe aerospace would be a fun field to be in. I was always fascinated with space. So I got a minor in aerospace engineering. And then when I got out of college, I started working for a really large firm that made power plants. So I was doing pipe stress analysis on power plants, and it was a big company. I didn't really like what I was doing. I didn't really like being a part of a big company. That just wasn't for me. And so I realized that, well, if I didn't like being a part of a big company, aerospace would be kind of tough for the most part. You know, there's smaller startups out there for sure. but I decided to get back into what I love the most about engineering, and that's product development. So I decided to work for a product development firm around the Philadelphia area. And then a few years later, I spun off my own business, Stoke Ventures, to really focus on helping inventors get their ideas out to market, because I didn't feel like there were enough really good product development resources out there for inventors, first-time entrepreneurs, people who have ideas, but they're not sure how to really get them to market. And it's a tough, sometimes it can be a tough crowd, because inventors don't necessarily always have the resources and the understanding, the knowledge to get something to market. And that's where I wanted to step in and help.
It's interesting, Andrew. So we're both aerospace engineers, just so you know.
Oh, awesome.
And your comment about large companies, sadly, when I graduated from college, I was going after the space program. And at that time, our country was more interested in defeating the Soviet Empire. And so, the defense budgets were going up dramatically. And I worked on really interesting stuff, but I couldn't talk about it. So eventually I ended up in the car companies, because they started embracing technologies that were already developed somewhere else, right, in the defense industry. Mm-hmm. And then the rest is, 30 years later, I'm retired from there. So, but I get your point about large companies and that innovative spirit that you might have, and you want to serve that. One of the comments you made on your websites and your profile was about keeping the audience, get to the audience before the product. And I think a lot of people that invent things, whether they're in a large company or on their own, that's one of their weaknesses, is they don't take care of the audience. And so, and in fact, one of my frustrations these days is the audience seems to be the money, meaning the investors, as opposed to maybe the end customers that might buy this thing. And then, of course, consumer behavior has taken a shock the last 18 months. It's changed for lots of reasons, and sometimes that's hard. So tell us, how do you put the audience before the product, and can that give you an advantage over your potential competitors?
Definitely. I mean, it gives you a head start, I think, over a lot of people who are putting the product first, which isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to develop a product and then get your audience, mm-hmm. build your audience from there. But it's so much easier to launch a product to an existing market, to an existing audience. If you go to a sporting event and, you talk about like captive audiences and existing mm-hmm. audiences, go to a sporting event and you've already bought a ticket to that event. You're already there and you get thirsty. So you want to get a beer. Well, they've got you there. They're selling beer to this existing audience that they already have. They didn't just set up a beer stand and say, hey, then start like trying to find out who their audience is. It's already there. It's already captive. They've already got the people there. And so if you already have the people there, like on your email list or subscribers to your YouTube channel or followers of your Instagram account, you can communicate with them and offer products to them so much easier, because all it takes is a post then, instead of, you develop this product, you think it's great. You may have gotten some amazing feedback and it may be, have a really great market fit, but then you've got an uphill battle then to get it out to your, to people. And you've got to figure out how to lower your acquisition costs, and you've just got a lot of work, and that work comes somewhere along the line, whether that's before you develop your product or after. But I would always recommend at least starting to build your audience before you finish developing your product. So I could imagine, especially to engineers where we measure everything, right? That this could be daunting. And I, one of my debating points with the market research people is there really a market? And what I'm getting at is, when you think about the iPhone, so if we go back 12 years ago, and you're a young guy, were you out of college 12 years ago? I'm just trying to guess here. Yes. Okay. You gotta think about that for a second, but yeah.
Okay. So that translates to barely, but yes.
Yeah.
as you were going through school, the way we communicated was not through an iPhone or equivalent phone, text messaging and all the rest. All this has happened in the past roughly decade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so where's the audience back then? Well, it's who you knew, right? It's your Rolodex of contacts or your friends' contacts, and you worked on word of mouth. I'm thinking of somebody like a Steve Jobs. There aren't very many of them, right? But he really got it. He got that if we put that in the hand of consumers, all kinds of consumers, they would not only would love using it as a phone, but they'd use it as a music playing device. And then as it got away from a spinning disk drive into solid state memory, then they can do all kinds of more things. And now today we can't imagine having less than several hundred apps on our phone, right?
Right.
I mean, it's just kind of amazing. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're that talented person who's innovated, you've come up with something, maybe even it's just an app today, and you're trying to figure out the audience, you also got to have some of this skill that Steve Jobs had. He insisted, and he drove his engineers nuts. He insisted that everything was within 2 clicks, everything. And so that guiding principle to me seems like a systems engineering principle where he just said, I don't care what you come up with, 2 clicks. If you can't do it in 2 clicks, we're not interested. And he's exactly right. The audience will not interact with stuff that takes multiple clicks. And especially computer scientists and mathematicians and engineers, we love these elaborate menu structures, and we learn to deal with it, right? But we're not particularly good at understanding that there's a audience that won't tolerate it. Your beer example. Well, $4 a glass, $8 a glass, whatever we're up to.
Yeah, probably 10 or 12 at this point. Yeah,
we need competition.
Right.
Well,
right.
If you bought the ticket to the facility controls that, and so it's the rare facility that will allow open vendors to come in and compete. But your point about audience is good. What I was curious about is, how do you balance your understanding of the audience maybe with some other guiding principles you learned in engineering school that say, yeah, but if we make it too complicated, we'll get the really crafty engineers, but they're so small compared to the other markets, right? We really want to get the bigger markets. How do you do that?
Exactly. Well, I think you touched on it with the Steve Jobs example. He focused on customer experience,
right?
And how do you, and I'll extend that a little further, just because I was thinking about this just yesterday. My mother-in-law we just got her an Apple Watch, and now she's obsessed with closing her rings, like for exercise and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And
human behavior.
Yeah. And they've created this amazingly simple way to get to demonstrate or to show you what your statistics are. In a way that not only like really easily shows you what's going on with your health. It's just this real quick snapshot, but it makes it interesting and exciting. I was actually looking at it like, I wonder how fast I could close my rings, but I don't have a watch. I don't have an Apple Watch, and I don't really like wearing watches. So I'm like, I'm somebody who doesn't even like wearing watches, and I want to get an Apple Watch just to do that. So they've created this really amazing experience that makes people want to interact with it and share it. And so we were talking about it yesterday, and my wife pulled up some pictures online of they're actually, you can buy t-shirts that says it's all about the rings. I closed my rings today.
So the branding. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So it turns into this whole marketing, genius branding thing that they didn't have to go pay to acquire a ton of customers. It just spreads on its own because the customer experience is so great that you want to share it. You want to tell your friends, you want to wear a t-shirt that talks about it. So I think, focusing on customer experience and making sure that it's really simple and beautiful is so important. Going back to that example, there's a million different ways that you could display your health statistics. And as engineers, we really do, like you talked about, we do tend to kind of overcomplicate things a lot. It's really easy to make things complicated. And you could have this, what Apple could have done was just had this stats page where they've got all these statistics and bar graphs and stuff about, and you kind of look at it and you're like, all right, I think I know what's going on. I think looks like I'm in good health, hopefully. I don't know. But instead, you just make it really simple. You make it so that anybody can quickly understand where they're at with their health. And all of a sudden they've made it so that anybody can figure it out really quickly.
Okay. So are there tools? Part of what we do at the Digital Enterprise Society is talk about the various tools from all kinds of different companies. Are there tools that help with this ideation and the realizing of the audience and even test out an idea somehow before you actually invest a lot more of your time in it?
Yeah, there's not many great, I haven't found anything that's really amazing in terms of, I have an idea, I want to validate it, I put it through this system and I can validate it really quickly. It's actually something that I'm kind of working on to figure out, something that, that we can use that's a little bit more plug and chug. Every validation for every product is a little bit different, but there's nothing right now that's really all that great for that. But there's systems that you can use, like there's pre-launch systems where if you have an idea for a product, you get some kind of MVP or minimum viable product, even before it's actually even functional. You just have, a wireframe for an app, or you have a simple concept CAD model for a physical product, and you put it out there. You create a creative for it, so you have some kind of call to action. Like, you clearly demonstrate what the product can do for people, what problems it solves. You make a creative for a Facebook or Instagram ad, or like a Google ad, and you start putting it in front of people, and you have this call to action to, like, hey, if this solves your problem, sign up to be the first to know about it when we launch. And you can take it a step further to not just get an email address, but also to do like a pre-launch.
So that's a form of a market test. And if you get a lot of response, then it's worthy to continue. If you don't get a response, it's either your advertising approach, or it's a great idea to you, but not to anybody else, right? So
exactly.
So this, you have another point we've talked about, the how to avoid the shiny object syndrome. This is especially a problem in a large company that's lost its way. You get senior management saying, "Hey, let's go try that technology," or "Hey, let's go." Well, I won't say something that offends people, but let's try a new kind of electric propulsion. But never mind.
Perpetual motion machine.
There's a good one. And only mechanical and aerospace engineers know how impossible that is, but a lot of people try. Anyways, how do you avoid it? How do you know? You're an innovator. You've got this fire in your gut that you want to go do this thing or a collection of things. How do you know which ones are just shiny objects and really aren't worth your time?
Well, that's a great question. Something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. I know I have struggled with it, and maintaining focus is so important to make sure that you can put enough time and effort on one thing and really stress test, really make sure that one thing is that you've given it the best shot, that they're the best chance of succeeding that you possibly can. Because a lot of times as I think as entrepreneurs, and then like you said, in larger companies where they've got bigger budgets and maybe they have the ability to go try a bunch of different things. It's really important not to go after too many things and not really give any one of them a fair shot at succeeding. So I think that's really tough, because especially in the discovery phase, when you don't know whether something is going to work or not, you're kind of hedging your bets. Like, okay, well, if this doesn't work, then I'll try this thing over here, and hopefully that'll work. Hopefully something will work. So you've got, a bunch of things going at one time.
Well, and then something like a pandemic occurs, and we're all at home, probably getting bored, or we're feeling unsafe at least. So it occurs to me that maybe what was a shiny object and you ignored it for good reasons. The reasons have changed, right? The amount of time people spend on their phones, the amount of time they spend doing what we're doing, right? We're doing a Zoom. We're not even close to each other. We're in 3 different parts of the country, right? So is there a way? I like what you said about, it's really about managing your time. But there's also, when conditions change, like the health of the health threats we all have dealt with, is there a way you go about looking back at the silver balls and see if one of them is worth picking up?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think some, and I've gone through this where I've had a couple of ideas where it just didn't make sense for me to pursue it at the time. When I did market research and when I started to chip away at the development of it, I realized like, hey, this is going to cost too much. It's going to cost more than I want to invest in this, or it's just not the right time, or, it's going to be like, I've had an idea for something that would require that I get it's more of like a platform. So I would need customers and I would need vendors. Okay. Something like not like Amazon, but Amazon does this where they've got vendors who are selling their products on their platform and they have customers. So they need to manage both. And one idea I had kind of dealt with that. And I just decided at the time I didn't really want to pursue it, but that idea keeps popping up actually where,
the Zooms and the Amazons of the world have made a boatload of money the past 18 months as a platform, right? and
e-commerce. Yeah, if you had a good idea for anything in e-commerce, now's the time. I mean, it's been the pandemic has accelerated the growth of e-commerce. It's probably pulled everything back or forward, however you want to look at it. But it's accelerated things by at least 3 to 5 years. I've heard up to 10, in some places. But yeah, I mean, I have a product that I sell called Grassracks. It's they're bamboo display racks for boards, bikes, and skis. And almost overnight, we saw our traffic double. Our sales didn't quite double, but they did increase by at least 50%. And
what did you attribute that to? Is it just they have time, or they're looking for new activities because they have time?
I think because more and more people were online. They were bored and at home and online. And we actually had an advantage that we were in the storage, in like the gear storage space, right, and display. So I think people were sitting at home with their gear stuck in a closet, and they were like, "Hey, I always wanted to get that, that pair of skis organized." Yeah, and they finally do it.
Okay. Wow. What are the mistakes people make when they're trying to launch a product? What are the common ones?
I think the number one thing that I see with my clients is lack of strategy and lack of understanding of the process of how to develop a product, how to protect it with a patent, if that's even necessary. That's not always necessary. I mean, you don't need to have a patent to start a business, but they just don't really understand all the steps that are involved. And if they did, everything would be a lot more clear. Everything would be a lot easier because you'd be able to follow this. You'd be able to put together a strategy and follow it, and also understand what your costs are through the process, because that's also really important and something that a lot of people don't understand and get wrong. And you're not going to understand your costs down to the dollar when you first start, but you should have an understanding of like, hey, it's probably going to cost me $10,000, $20,000+ to get a patent. It's going to cost me $10,000, $20,000 plus to develop the product. And then, marketing, you've got all these other things that you've got to put into the mix and understand.
So I think it would help them to understand that, if the piece they understand, the idea and the making of the prototype and even trying that out with a few consumers, okay, maybe that's 10% of the budget.
Right.
And budget is both money and time, right? I mean, you might have the time and not have the money, or you might have the money and not have the time. The thing that always fascinated me about product development is, and it's part of why I preferred a car company over an aerospace company in defense, was just that is, your real test of success was the market liked your product and they bought it, whether it's the next sports car or the next sport utility vehicle. It's kind of an affirmation, right? It's a feedback that, hey, yeah, we nailed it, right? Yeah. Now we also had pretty good advertising and all the rest of that. So people's awareness, strategy is hard to do, and it's undervalued a lot of places. But you also touched on customer service as an important attribute, and I think a lot of innovators, it's about the thing, it's not about the experience, and yet that's how you get a repeat sale is through customer service. So give us your pointers on how does a startup company, small company, deal with customer service? I mean, do they outsource it, or do they get coaching? How do they do that?
I mean, honestly, I think it's actually really, really simple. And if you're a small business, if you've got a few people in your business and you have maybe hundreds or a few thousand customers in a year, you really don't need to outsource it. It's the one thing actually with Grassracks, my business partner and I, it's just the two of us who are full-time on that business. And actually neither of us are actually full-time because we've got other things going on. Like I have Stoke Ventures, obviously, but we are the only real employees of the business, and we're over thousands of orders a year, and it's probably the last thing that we'll outsource. We're outsourcing other things to help scale, to help us grow. But customer service is the one thing we'll probably hang on to as long as possible. And even when we outsource it, we'll make sure that the people who are doing it are doing it really well to our standard, because it's honestly so easy. We get a customer message, they have a question about a product, and you just get back to them as quickly as you can. That you answer their question and ask if there's anything else you ever need, feel free to give us a shout. So they know that they can contact the owner of the company. That's huge.
It's kind of like a basic human traits. It's just interaction, right?
It's
and keeping it personal. The more when you start making it impersonal, that's a mistake. So
exactly.
Right,
when they
I wanted to ask you one other thing about partnerships. You kind of just alluded to it. Partnerships can help. They can accelerate. They can also threaten. Even the kind of partner that just takes your idea and runs with it, which you mentioned patents before. That's one way to help that. What's your advice to our listeners on partnerships? How do you know when you mentioned you outsource some things but not others? How do you know which partnerships to form if you're starting out with your baby here?
Yeah, I mean, find people who when you talk with them, you feel like they're on the same page as you. So if you're trying to hire a product developer, talk with them, feel comfortable with them. It's like hiring, somebody to come in and paint your house, or I say that actually because we're getting a room painted right this minute. So it's the first thing that came to mind. But when we talked to this contractor, we just had a really good feeling about his work and his confidence, and we have no idea how good it's going to be until the work is done. But you do want to have this warm and fuzzy feeling, and hey, these people get it. They get me. They understand my vision. And then the next thing is, if possible, kind of, especially let's say you're hiring a marketing agency, give them a little bit to do. Don't start with, this
do a trial,
massive,
right?
Exactly. Do a trial. As much as you can do a trial,
Yeah. So I like what you said about your contractor there. I think it is just communication. It starts with that. And then if you get this feedback that they get what you're doing, then that's forming trust. And exactly. So communication and trust are the keys to partnerships. And I'm, my 2 cents, I'll answer my own question, is be wary of those partnerships where they're really big and you're really small. Because if you got a really good thing, you're going to get bought out. I mean, that's just the way the world works. It's okay, by the way. You can benefit from that. But if you really want to be in control, I marvel at what Amazon and others are doing in providing services. And then I'm disappointed with the flip side, which is some of those times they decide to get in that market because they figure out through your experience that the market's really worth being in. And, that's the way capitalism is. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying to the entrepreneur, be aware of that when you get into that. Right.
Well, and speaking of partnerships and Amazon's an interesting company because they focus so heavily on their customer service. They really nail it. They really do an amazing job to the customer. But the flip side is they do, in my opinion, because we sell on Amazon, they do a pretty terrible job of managing their vendors. And that's the lifeblood of, a business like that. If it wasn't for their vendors, Jeff Bezos would still be selling books out of his garage, So it's so interesting to me that you've got to make sure that you're building it. Like if you're building a platform like that or any kind of two-sided platform that you're managing all your partners equally and doing a good job of that.
That's a good way for us to end. I mean, be careful, but get help, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there are people out there like yourself that can help budding entrepreneurs. And so reach out. And then if you really get attracted to one of the big kids, well, that's fine, except maybe ask somebody like Andrew, hey, what's it like as a vendor for that platform? And if you get some cautious feedback, listen to it and learn from it. So, hey, Andrew, this has been great. Appreciate the help and the insight for some of our listeners who might be becoming entrepreneurs themselves. And Thom, I'll hand it back to you.
So Thanks, Greg. Andrew, thank you so much for being here. If somebody wants to find out more about you or about Stoke Ventures, how do they find you?
StokeVentures.com. And then you can find out more about me through and Stoke Ventures at Stoke Ventures on Instagram. It's Stoke_Ventures. And feel free to DM me, email me, just reach out, schedule a free consultation through StokeVentures.com to talk with me about product development, product launch, and strategy.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for being here. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. Please join us every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and information around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Remember, check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.